Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Hello, and welcome to Movies vs. Capitalism, an anti-capitalist movie podcast. I'm Rivka, and we are back. We took a spring break of sorts, and unfortunately, Frank got COVID and is resting. So it's just me for today's topical while Frank gets better. And it's a good reminder to stay safe, wear masks in crowds, especially if you're out there protesting. I'm really saying this as a reminder to myself as well. Just be well, take care of yourselves, and we hope you get better, Frank. I guess before we get to our conversation, where you'll get plenty of Frank and I wanted to just touch on some entertainment news. The Met Gala took place last night, which Frank and I covered last year around this time. It's wild that we have been recording this podcast for a year. And last year's theme was in honor of the late Islamophobic racist designer Karl Lagerfeld. And we discussed how parading around wealth and celebrity in that moment under the guise of art and fashion was deeply out of touch, and contrasted it with the climate protests at that time. And this year, the grotesque spectacle, of course, is even more vile in contrast to the genocide occurring in Gaza at this very moment. And of course, the protests against that genocide that are rising up on college campuses and throughout our streets and our cities across the country. There were protests outside the Met Gala last night, and there was also a large police presence from what I've seen reports from protesters who were there. The police and barricades protecting the Met Gala, and of course all of the capital class inside, were insane. But I think the Black Mirror surrealness of this moment really comes across in the NBC Morning News headline from today, which states, Israel seizes Rafah crossing and the gala looks. I mean, what the fuck? Look at this framing. First of all, Israel didn't seize Rafah. That language feels like something that naturally occurs under war, when what is really happening is Israel has been doing collective punishment on Palestinian women, children, and men since October 7th, and now they're continuing this collective punishment through a brutal bombardment of Rafah. So, there's that. But this headline also suggests in its framing that the gala looks are an equal footing, equal importance to our culture. Like, are you fucking kidding me? This is fucking news. The gala looks are fucking news in comparison. It's an astounding piece of propaganda. And I really debated even talking about it because I didn't want to give the Met Gala further attention. But I think what we do on this podcast is we try to look critically at how movies and entertainment are used to either uphold structures or to liberate us from them. And this is a really great example of upholding these structures and this type of propaganda. So perhaps if you find yourself talking to folks who, as I have, wish you could just chill out and enjoy the fashion and celebrate art, you can maybe open up a dialogue, explain to them that, you know, of course we can celebrate fashion without accepting this grotesque spectacle. And maybe you can invite them to consider why the Met Gala is being so widely discussed. Why is it being discussed over the bombing of Rafah, the bombing of children and babies there? Okay, I think that's all the weight I want to give to that topic. And we do have a really, really great conversation today. So before we get to that, I want to remind our audience that we don't sell ads on this show. What we do is donate ad space, and we rely completely on community support to make sure that this show keeps going. So if you would like to support us, if you can support us, you can do that by subscribing to our Patreon. We have just dropped a really cool episode on Civil War a few weeks ago on there, and we're going to continue to drop some Patreon episodes. So hopefully you will join us over there. That's just for $5 a month that you get access to those and our entire back catalog of premium episodes. You can find our Patreon link in the episode description in your podcast player or by going to mvcpod.com. Also, make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast on your podcast player so you don't miss new episodes. All right, we're going to take a break, but we will be right back with our guest Julian Elijah Martinez to discuss the film Oldboy.
Sometimes the problems of the world feel overwhelming, like there's nothing we can do. That's why we want to tell you about Ember Cooperative, a group dedicated to breaking down the challenges we face into meaningful actions we can do in our daily lives. They highlight ways that we can all think and do differently to shift norms and forge a more humane future.
For example, the Ember Co-op team recently analyzed the racist and politically motivated war on drugs, which has ruined countless lives and devastated entire communities. Their action guide includes ideas such as hosting a living room conversation about the intersection of addiction and incarceration, supporting reality-based drug education at your kid's school or in conversations with young people, or if you are the 1 in 4 U.S. workers licensed or certified for your work, advocating for fair chance licensing. You can read the full guide at ember.coop.
For their next project, Ember is addressing the need for more diverse forms of activism beyond just signing petitions and donating money. You can follow their work at ember.coop, or if you'd like to get involved, you can apply to join their team. Add your skills to this small think and do tank where you'll have equal say in what they do and how they do it.
Learn more at ember.coop. That's ember.coop. Today, we are joined by Julian Elijah Martinez. Elijah is a New York-based actor. Some recent credits include Network, a film which we covered on this show, but this was the play on Broadway.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, very cool. This Land Was Made at the Vineyard Theater, Sanctuary City at New York Theater Workshop, and 9 Circles at Forum Theater, for which he was nominated for a Helen Hayes Award. That's just to name a few. There's a lot more. And on TV, maybe you've caught Elijah in Wu-Tang and American Saga, and more. Elijah is also the co-host of The Episode 1 Show, a podcast that breaks down, analyzes, and reverse engineers pilot scripts in hopes of helping screenwriters with their own writing. Elijah is also another member of the Capitalist Reading Group I'm a part of. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Very excited to talk to you two. I've been listening to your podcast, and I'm pretty blown away by your analysts, so I'm a little nervous.
Ooh.
Well, first of all, thank you. You have nothing to be nervous
Yeah.
about, because everyone that's come from, and Riv, just to be clear, you said Capitalist Reading Group. I want to make it abundantly clear for our listeners. It is
Imagine, I was thinking Capital. Imagine we all read Capital going in as anti-capitalist, and we came out and we're like, actually,
We're actually capitalists.
we're going to make a lot of money and exploit a bunch of people.
We just read the Wall Street Journal. That's all we do.
Yeah.
We discuss various articles.
Have you ever thought about like how much money you could make if you just had no morals or ethics whatsoever?
I think
Is that ever,
about
like-
it a lot,
Oh
actually.
my God, yes.
I do.
Yeah.
That's what I dream about. I just rub my pillow of Jeff Bezos and my body pillow of his shape of his body.
Well, I thanks for naming that you're nervous, but that's funny to me because I think you're so smart. I'm so looking forward to your take on this film. But before we get to it, I'm gonna you're so smart, I'm even gonna quote you because you recently said something in an article that I thought was really interesting, and I think our listeners might be interested to hear a little bit about this. You were talking about the emergence of social media and how it's transformed the term artist into creative, blurring its original essence. That creatives now primarily produce commodities for commercial exchange, and this commercialization opens avenues for capitalist exploitation. And then you went on to say, personally, I'm actively engaged in reclaiming the term artist rather than using the term creative. This distinction resonates with me as a means to preserve the integrity of artistic expression for its true purpose. I thought that was so...
I fucking love that.
Yeah, so fucking great. And I just wanted to ask you a little bit, while I have you here, a little bit more about that, because, our reading group is very strict. We don't actually get to talk.
No, we don't. We just talk about
As you would
capital.
imagine communists to be.
I think that there's a book out there called Techno-Feudalism, and I forget the writer. And the writer basically is breaking down this idea. And our facilitator, Chris Myers, talked about this a little bit when we got off topic, the rare times that we do get off topic in that reading group. About essentially like what is essentially happening is that we are creating quote unquote content for these social media platforms, and the way that they have structured them with this idea of likes and engagement is not a true way of actually paying us. And so essentially we're engaging with this and we're getting exploited at an even more rapid and extreme rate than we are now. And I found that like when essentially it becomes just about content, then content is devoid of politics. Content is devoid of soul and spirit, and content doesn't necessarily have to say anything besides breaking the algorithm. And oftentimes that's the lowest common denominator. And so it strips us of our ability as artists to actually engage with our community, actually be in service of what we are, which is essentially voices for both ourselves and for the people who are around us. I think, Marie Baraka says, like, the role of artists is to raise the consciousness of the people, but you can't raise the consciousness of the people if you're always trying to just have all your stuff hit a certain algorithm. It's impossible, Also, I don't like to post every day. I tried to be an influencer once. It didn't work out quite so well. So maybe I'm just bitter. Maybe I'm just a bitter
No.
failed influencer.
Absolutely not. No. I think anyone that like has gone the influencer route and then was like, "Oh, this makes me feel terrible. I hate doing this." Is just that's like a natural response, I feel.
Yeah.
And I love this idea that you articulated just about how the transition of artist from artist to creator and content, it just adds another level of alienation between the artist and the art that they are creating.
Right.
And it's no longer, we're not even pretending that it's about artistic expression. It is solely about generating content. It is solely about the commodification of one's artwork. I think about, like, imagine if like Leonardo da Vinci came out with the Mona Lisa and someone was like, wow, great content. Like, it's such an absurd conceit when you think about it in the modern age, if you apply it to just like any like pre-capitalist formation.
Right. Well, the big game, the big like scam that has been like played upon us is the fact that like the content has the value, not the artist. You know what I'm saying? Or even if we don't want to, like, even if someone quote unquote wants to be like, all right, well, I do want to call myself a creator, it still does the same thing. The creator has not the value, the content does, and we're seeing that with the increasing need to automate art, which is a thought that like no one has ever had probably in the history of humanity. The fact that like we want to like create machines that can automate our art and strip the humanity of it, so it's bleak, but as we know in a capitalist society, it's a natural progression of where we're going with this post whatever late stage capitalism that we're in.
Yeah.
Well, bleak is appropriate for this film and for where we're headed. I mean,
it's a romp. This film is a romp. A nice light.
Yeah, if you're looking for something, I mean, I'm sure there'll be lulls, there'll be laughs, but
it is a fun. There's fun in this movie.
Yeah, there is humor.
There's humor. It's not so self-serious, although the subject matter is extremely serious. Elijah, I was so excited that you chose this movie. I'm even more excited to hear your thoughts on it, because it wasn't a movie that I had ever really considered to cover on this podcast. But then after watching it, I was like, oh, I see. So today we are talking about the film Oldboy, the original Oldboy, not the remake with Josh Brolin that sucks.
No.
Released in 2003, directed by Park Chan-wook and co-written by Park Chan-wook, Hwang Ju-eun, and Lim Jun-hyung. The film stars Choi Min-sik, Yoo Ji-tae, and Kang Hye-jung. The budget for this film was approximately $3 million and earned around $17.5 million worldwide. And if you've never seen this film, here's the synopsis. Although this is one of those movies that should not be spoiled for you. So if you have not seen this movie, go watch it before you listen to this, because this will include spoilers. The synopsis is, if you haven't seen it in a while, the film revolves around Oh Dae-soo, a drunk businessman who is inexplicably confined in a cell designed to mimic a hotel room for 15 years, without any clue regarding to the identity of his captor or the reasons behind his imprisonment. Upon his unexpected release, Dae-soo finds himself entangled in an ongoing conspiracy and a relentless cycle of violence as he embarks on a mission to unearth and confront his mysterious captor. As he delves deeper into his quest for vengeance, his life takes an unforeseen turn when he develops romantic feelings for Mi-do, a young sushi chef, further complicating his journey.
We like to give a little historical context for the year that this film came out, which, as you mentioned, was 2003. So here in the U.S., President Bush just signed the third largest tax cut package in history into law, reducing the top 4 marginal income tax rates, as well as the tax rate on capital gains and dividends, which, spoilers, great for the rich, not for the rest of us. In January, the Department of Homeland Security began operating, and Apple launched iTunes. and sold 1 million songs during its first week. And the average college graduate had $18,630 average in student loan debt, which feels like any student loan debt feels like a lot, but like that's low, right? Compared to like that's like
comparatively for sure
2 weeks in school now. Like I think that covers like 2 weeks.
That's a Wednesday.
It's a Wednesday.
Nowadays. But also like the iTunes thing, that's kind of crazy because like it's like Homeland Security plus iTunes, like Jesus Christ. Like
also
all
the wars
shit.
in Afghanistan and Iraq are happening right now.
Right. Yeah. We're prime Bush is bushing. Like
Bush is bushing. Yeah.
And this movie this is like a post 9/11 movie for sure. I mean, they include a clip of 9/11 in the opening. But we'll get into it a little bit more. So Elijah, the first thing we start with, we asked our guest, why did you choose this movie to talk about on this podcast?
Yeah, one, Oldboy was like the first, outside of like, conversations about anti-capitalism, Oldboy was like the first film that really kind of like got me jazzed into like cinema as a thing. And I think like, it also like weirdly and like racistly for Americans like revived Asian cinema in our own zeitgeist, which is, kind of fucked because like they've been creating, Korea, Hong Kong, Japan have been creating amazing films for like a number of years, and then it took like this incredibly violent conversation about toxic masculinity to get a bunch of film bros to be like, yeah, y'all make good cinema.
Sick fights, dude.
Yeah,
Quentin
dude.
Tarantino leading the guard.
Yeah, exactly. But I was curious. I was like, I wanted to come back to this film for a long time. I want to watch it again, and I remember it being a very kind of strong, kind of like poignant conversation about society. But then as I was watching it, I was like, okay, so then I'm curious like how we're going to look at this through an anti-capitalist lens, because I think a lot of the conversations that this film is having is directly correlated to like masculinity and what is done to the female body, and I'm curious like how we'll kind of look at that through your podcast.
So Frank, you'd seen this also. This is funny because it's funny you brought up gender because I think Frank, you've seen that. This was my first watch show.
Oh,
so
wow.
yeah.
What'd you think?
Yeah, Riv, what did you see the first time?
I'm glad you said don't, like, if you don't want to let us spoil this, because it, in terms of story structure, in terms of cinema, like, yeah, it's phenomenal. I like this kind of the way it was shot.
Nice.
I feel like it, even though it was 2003, it feels like it could be have just come out, is how I felt. I just thought there was so much to marvel at. It makes a lot of sense that there's like famous sequences, and aesthetically, I really liked it. I like uncomfortable cinema. I think one of the director was quoted as saying like he wants people to leave the cinema feeling tired and physically and emotionally drained. Their bodies are exhausted, and he doesn't know how people can find any fun in watching mindless cinema. So if you want a peaceful rest, have a bath. So
he's such a dick.
And like that, so that was the experience. It was not chill. It was, but I enjoyed it, and I'm so grateful to have the experience to talk about it after. I think it would be a lot to not have discourse after, because it's a real mind fuck.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like my big experience of it, but there's definitely a lot that I was going back and forth about the sex politics. I think there's actually a lot more. At first I was like, what are the politics? And then it started to, like, as I started to like pinpoint into different themes, they started to become clear. I think there's a lot that we can extrapolate from it as well.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those films that on the surface, it's like American Psycho. Like the idea behind the film, people think it's one thing, and so a lot of people latch onto that, and without realizing that like actually underneath it is its real politics, and what it's actually saying is a lot more disturbing and a lot more difficult to stomach. And it's not a cool, like, even though they're cool sequences, it's like I think a lot of folks are like, oh, it's super cool, it's super violent, it's super this, that, and the third. And actually these are really pathetic people.
It's very well written. Some of the reviews I read just felt like so racist in the sense that they're like, well, you can see how he's really just obsessed with Quentin Tarantino. And I personally really don't like Quentin Tarantino. So I was surprised to love this film. And I think the difference for me was the writing.
Yeah.
The director also says, I feel like most directors, when they're like, what are your influences? They reference more modern archetypes, but he straight goes for, he's like Shakespeare, Sophocles, like the big ones. And I was telling Frank that I was like, yeah, but you know what? It tracks.
Yeah.
That Tarantino comp is also bullshit because Kill Bill came out the same year.
Yes.
Came out in 2003. So the only things prior to that were his last movie was Jackie Brown. So that's very fucking racist to be like, oh man, this guy must have ripped this off from this movie that literally just came out at the same time. Fuck that.
Yeah.
I had seen this movie in college. It was just on a film list, and I remember just like firing it up one day. I was really trying to, I had not watched a ton of foreign cinema in high school, and I was really trying to like expand in college. And I remember it just like melting my mind, just like in a dorm room, probably stoned with a couple of buddies, just being like, oh my God, dude, it's like these fights. And then the twist at the end. And definitely having the experience, like having the surface level experience that we are criticizing right now as an 18-year-old, not extrapolating.
That sounds like, just the way you're describing it, Frank, that sounds like the worst way to like, as you're saying it, I'm like, that sounds like a nightmare way to watch it.
I thought it was a lot of fun.
No, I'm sure you did, but I'm just imagining being like watching some of those scenes surrounded like bros in a dorm room. So
yeah, I mean, it's just
you
a lot
are
of like
the bro in the dorm room in this case. I wouldn't.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a lot of like, oh my God, oh no, just like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, not extrapolating any of the politics from it. So I was really excited. I hadn't seen it since then, so I was very excited to revisit it. And I think it's interesting because, Elijah, you already mentioned that kind of the big theme that you were taking away was toxic masculinity. And I had a totally different read on what the main theme of this movie was. So I love having these kind of conversations when everyone has a different take on it. Because for me, this was a movie really about the carceral system and how the carceral system is solely predicated on punishment and not reform, and doesn't leave anybody that goes through it better than when they went into for the first place. So I think there's a lot of different places that we can go, but let's start with you since you are our guest.
Yeah, I think it's at first, like my first watch of it, I was enamored by the protagonist and the antagonist, and I'm the whole time I'm like, just wrapped up in that kind of like sickening kind of like cycle of violence that the two of them have. And then this time watching through, I was shocked at how brutal it actually is towards women during the entirety of the film. How often, like, particularly the sex scenes are aggressive and violent, and how it feels like the core of what their pursuit is acts of vengeance, but these acts of vengeance are because of things that have happened to the women that they feel like they possess of some sort of capacity, whether or not that be the antagonist Woo Jin Lee's sister, or hopefully I'm not gonna butcher his name, Dae Soo Oh's love interest.
Oh, you mean his daughter?
Well, spoiler.
We're spoiling.
It's spoiled.
It's spoiled.
Spoiler. And actually, you know what's funny about that? I don't know if you came in your research, but it's based on a manga, and in the manga there's no incest.
Oh.
Right,
Yeah.
There's no incest. Actually, I read that the director, they were trying to figure out how to make sense of him being in this private prison for 15 years. Like, why 15 years? Why wouldn't they take him out sooner? And this is gross as I'm saying it, but it's what he thought while in the bathroom, where, sometimes the best creative ideas come. But he's like, well, that would be the amount of time it would take her to come of age, which I don't know if that means she's actually supposed to be 15, which makes it even more gross, but...
Ugh.
That was the genesis of that idea.
Yeah, it's fascinating that Park Chan-wook is interested more, because the manga's more interested in why he's in there in prison, and Park Chan-wook is more interested in why he gets let go. And there's even a line towards the end of the movie where he says, like, you wanted to know why I put you in, but the real question is why I let you go. And as I'm thinking about it and extrapolating, it's like he lets him go, but then he just kind of sticks him into a larger prison, which is another big theme that kind of happens within it. But it's so hard to look at this in 2024 and just not see all of
Yeah.
the like major like, and I know that's on purpose. Like it's not a critique. It's hard for me. It's just hard for me not to see it nowadays, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was really hard to watch and also very informative of toxic masculinity, the mindset, the culture, just like when it was hard because there wasn't a conscious like choice. There was no agency for any of these women.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a way to look at it and give like a critique, but it did. Yeah, I found myself feeling like that was hard. That was the hardest stuff to watch. And that's definitely not when you read reviews, like what people, at least what I saw, it was like the octopus was harder to watch, I think, for people than like the female human being basically R word, you know?
Right. Well, and that's the thing about it is like it's in the text. Like we're supposed to look at it because like she's being hypnotized. You know what I mean? Like she literally has no agency. And and the way she's shot like a puppet. You know, like there's that wonderful moment where all the moments that we thought are, you mentioned, Frank, about the humor. There's a wonderful shot where they go back and and the antagonist is explaining like what I did and how every step you took, like I've been in control of. And all the like quote unquote humor moments that we've had are actually moments in which the hypnotism has hit in. So like they're being puppeted along over the course of the entire movie. So like that's why I feel like it is the toxic masculinity resonates so much with me within this movie. And I think that why Park Chan-wook is so kind of, because the other movies in the Vengeance trilogy are also very similar in terms of like men committing violence against other men because of things that other men have done to the women that they possess, you know?
So are you both reading this as intentionality? Do you think this is like his you think okay? Because I kind of I see it for sure, but some of it also I'm always wary of, especially movies from like, I don't know, the 80s, 90s, early 2000s where there just was much less consideration towards female characters, just like writ large.
Well, I think the intentionality is there behind the toxic masculinity and the exploration of that for sure. But when you only explore that and when there's, and I think it's really only exploring that, and therefore the woman becomes the puppet and has no agency, I do think you start to, and I think this film doesn't at moments start to become unsuccessful in trying to make that message because it becomes in some ways the thing it fears. And I don't know quite what the solution, is other than changing some of the story. And I still loved the story, but I did not find the exploration of that successful enough. What I thought was interesting is the connection between the toxic masculinity and the read that I also had, Frank, which was yours, about the carceral system and privatized prisons. And it's actually making me think about, I don't know if you're familiar with Richie Reseda. So Richie Reseda is an activist and was an inmate at a prison in California, and there began studying and organizing around feminism and toxic masculinity with his fellow inmates. And there's this really amazing documentary on his work called The Feminist on Cell Block Y. And you see him start to, organize and study around these issues. And so it was just that intersection of and he deals with so much of that, the intersection of toxic masculinity and this barbaric prison system and what needs to be done to liberate from that. And so, and he's definitely anti-capitalist and someone that I recommend our listeners check out because I'm learning so much about feminism just listening to him. So I think there is something that this film like almost gets to in that intersection, but I don't know that it makes that it's like I had to extrapolate more than I wanted to when it came to like a justification for so much of that. Like I didn't mind the violence because I understood it more in the world. It was the sexual violence there were moments where I'm like, I could see someone watching this and being like, well, a man has needs. And when he's been locked away for 15 years, like the first moment he just goes to his daughter, which he doesn't know his daughter, but which I don't know. I wasn't fully, I was conflicted, I guess. I'm still conflicted.
Yeah.
It's a big suspension of disbelief to think like you wouldn't recognize your own daughter even as an adult. But if we can suspend our disbelief.
But it wasn't even the daughter part. It was just the it almost was like in some places, even though we find out he was hypnotized, and it was like this there wasn't enough distinction between like human nature and this torture, and you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I felt like that first moment you're talking about, right after she brings him back to her apartment, and he just instinctively, or not, he sexually assaults her in the bathroom, and it feels like the film is playing it for laughs a little bit, like that. It felt like the film was trying to be intentionally funny about it, saying, "Oh, he just got out of prison. Of course he's going to go try to sexually assault her." And then, she throws him off, and then it's just kind of not mentioned. And she kind of takes everything on the chin, which also then adds to this.
Yeah.
It adds to this idea that this is normal. This is okay. We can just kind of like shrug that off, and it's not a big deal.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, she's similar to another character, and I think in Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, which came out before this one, which was the first in the Vengeance trilogy, and it's similar. She's a similar kind of like, for lack of a better term, like manic pixie dream girl almost as
Yeah.
and similar, like that character, there is violence that happens to that character, and it's almost as if like that violence that occurs to her is, it's not played for laughs, but it is a catalyst for the actions of the protagonist rather than her having agency and the violence being in consequence to something that she has done or consequence of something around society, if that makes sense.
You know what it is, as you're saying this, like I really desired the female rage, and the fact that this is such a rageful, vengeful film, to not let her have any of that, and it's all him, and made me sick.
Yeah.
I think that's totally fair. I think you're absolutely right in that this film gives essentially no agency to any of the female characters. And whether that's commentary or whether that's intentional, it can easily be misinterpreted at just face value, which like we're saying, which I think like a lot of satires run into this problem. We've talked about this on this podcast. It's like it's the Wolf of Wall Street American Psycho conundrum.
Yes.
It's incredible satire, but you get the wrong person watching it and they're like, those are some cool dudes.
Yeah.
Cool dudes.
This is my manifesto.
Yeah,
Oldboy.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know who's watching Oldboy and is like, I gotta do some of that. I've got to imprison my enemies for 15 years.
Unfortunately, I'm sure like there is a version of men's right movement like watching this. Like there is just that take. There is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, like, it is an incredibly cool film, you know what I mean, on the surface. And so it's so hard not to look at the main character and be like, and he's in a black suit and his hair is all disheveled, and
those sunglasses that he steals from the lady. Yeah.
He smokes that cigarette the way that way cool people do, with like two fingers but like upside down. Like, it's,
what do you call that hairstyle from the early 2000s where it's just like, like it was just like a little spiky on the sides? I feel like there's a lot of the hairstyles really dated this movie. There's a lot of like emo
yeah,
bangs.
it was emo-esque.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's like pointy, sticky.
Yeah, it's like if you stick your finger in a socket.
Yes.
I mean, for you, Frank, not for me.
Yes.
Electrified.
Yes. But you're right. It's such a visually dynamic movie. The pacing of it is relentless. The colors, I was like so blown away by how sharp the contrast was.
Mm-hmm.
It was like someone like took the contrast way higher than you would ever want in a normal like feature film.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. As that 18-year-old in the dorm room, I remember the big thing, other than the twist at the end, the big thing was that hallway fight. Fight. And I think that's often regarded as one of the top 10 film fights of all time by the film scholars. So it's like the visual storytelling is it's so frenetic. It feels like almost stream of consciousness at times.
Mm-hmm.
I love the way that the film portrayed memory as sort of like these oneers of both old Dae-soo and young Dae-soo in the same setting, it like reliving the same memories. So it's just like it's a real feat of filmmaking just on the surface.
Yeah. And he apparently Park really takes his time, which is so funny because his films feel both sloppy and precise all at the same time. There's that awesome shot where Dae-soo is confronting Woo Jin, and usually and Woo Jin is looking in the mirror and Dae-soo is like in the background. And usually what ends up happening, especially for Americans, is that you'll rack focus from one person to the other one, and my eye was trying to rack focus. Like I'm watching that scene. Yeah, and I'm literally trying to but Woo Jin stays out of focus, and you're still, even though like Dae-soo is way in the back, he's still the one that you're supposed to be looking at. And that would be like, we would think of like that as a mistake, but because Park Chan-wook is so specific with his filmmaking, it's like even that little tiny thing that should be, a mistake, you're like, oh, that's on purpose. That's on purpose for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, and there was so much. I mean, the whole story was one giant mirror. I'm sure if you go back and pull through the screenplay, I know this is what you do on your podcast, there was just so much, just the image from the top where the first time he gets out of that prison and he meets the man who wants to commit suicide and he's holding him by the tie, mirrors the last image of when we find out why he's been in prison, because the brother's like holding his sister who, spoiler, he's been fucking over the bridge.
A lot of incest.
Everything comes in two, they needed two two incests. But I just want to go back to the private prison system bit here too, because that was also something that I was stuck on watching it this time around. And it's so interesting because I think like the 80s is really when the US, I think that's when the privatization of the US prison system is really starting to pop off really intensely. I mean, obviously it's in our country's history, but this like people making massive profits. I think since 1980, it's grown like 790%, the prison population. It's a wild capitalist industry. In case anyone listening doesn't know, you can start to read about it. People are making a lot of money. It turns out it's not actually about any of the things that they tell you, like rehabilitation or society or crime. And I think it's interesting when you see people talk, some of the things I've seen people write about this film is like, could you imagine if there were places that like you could pay someone to like imprison someone for no good reason, something as small as they talk too much and just being shook. And I'm like, well, yeah, this is a great film to sort of wake people up in some ways. It's like, I can imagine it actually happens. Khalif Browder was arrested at 16 years old for allegedly stealing a backpack, which honestly I think is less harmful than talking too much. So already for less in this country, for stealing at 16 years old, spent 3 years at Rikers without a trial. So yeah, that's exactly what's happening. So like this shit is happening here all the time.
On a massive scale,
a massive scale. This is a small example, but this story reminded me so much of what's happening in Oldboy. And again, how it's like, wow, that just like only happens outside of the United States. Right. The charges eventually are dropped against him in 2013. And then he dies of suicide 2 years later. Because, oh yeah, by the way, 2 of those 3 years, he was in solitary confinement. So there's so much just watching this film when you just see the suffering. Like I think Dae-soo tries to kill himself multiple times inside of those walls for 15 years. Just the insanity I thought of it. And it's interesting you said the manga spends more time on that. Like I just thought that was so effective. There was the visualization, the way that the filmmaker portrayed how the psychological torture of that, you can only get so close,
Right. Well, and also like even though the manga spends such a great deal of time on it, it's still like the idea of like the prison only just gets larger, and so as soon as you leave, like you're still trapped within a series of systems that that control who you fall in love with, that control what you wear, that control like what restaurants you pick. Every single step that you take is at the whims of somebody who has enough money to do that. Right. So it's like the layers upon layers upon layers in which we are all kind of incarcerated in the system is pretty profound, especially when you look at it through Oldboy.
And the way that incarceration, especially in the United States, just destroys people's lives, Rivka, like you just said about Khalif Browder. I mean, if people don't know, for a lot of people, especially people convicted of felonies, who even get out of prison, in a lot of cases, almost impossible to find regular employment, can't vote, difficult to access finances, difficult to access, like all of the things that we need to access in order to live as functional members of this quote unquote society. A lot of those are taken away from the people who have served their time. So if we're pretending that this guise of, you go, you do your time, then you come out, and you can be a member of society again. It's complete bullshit, especially in this fucking country where it is solely about punishment, and there is barely any systems in place for reform. And I also just want to highlight real quickly for anyone who doesn't know, the U.S. has the largest prison population in the entire world. We have 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prisoners, which is absolutely fucking insane and needs to be shouted from the rooftops every single day. And I want to hear anyone ever talk to me about other countries and their prisons and how terrible it is. Like, we are the worst ones. This is the worst place.
But capitalism has nothing to do with that.
No, I mean,
No, man. You can get out. You can get a nice job, maybe.
Yeah, it's really it's just trickling down,
Yeah, just trickling down. Yeah.
And in terms of this movie and what Odesu's imprisonment does to him is that he emerges as this person who is solely consumed by revenge, by wanting to exact as much violence against the people who put him in that box. And you're watching him and you're like, of course he would. This is the logical progression for punishing someone this brutally. It made me think we just actually covered Princess Mononoke, which I'd never seen before, and made me think about that, about how, like, the violence in that world, creates hate and animosity, and how hate begets violence and violence begets hate, and it's just like this vicious cycle. And I felt like there was a lot of that in here, starting from Lee Woo-jin's his whole plan to imprison and punish Dae-soo, and then Dae-soo emerging as just like this violent animal, essentially, his only preoccupation is now just like, I'm just going to kill and fight until the people who hurt me are then also hurt.
Right, but that's also a part of Lee Woo-jin's plan. Lee Joo-won knows that he's going to come out and be a psychopath. He has that wonderful line where he's like, "Look at the monster I've created." So like, people who run society aren't stupid. I think we like to be like, oh, yes, evil's so banal, you know what I mean? And like, how can you possibly put somebody in solitary confinement for 2 years and not know what's going to happen to them? Of course they know what's going to happen to them. They knew exactly what's going to happen to that boy, and when he kills himself, like, they're not surprised. You know what I mean? So it's the same thing. Like, it's the same thing with slavery in this country. Like, they knew exactly what they were doing when they created slaves, and they knew exactly what kind of people they would create if they created slaves. That's why they went systematically and did the things that they did, So I think, like, that's also something that I take away from this is, like, we have to, speaking of cops, oftentimes I think, we get online and we talk about it because I think it's a way for us to kind of deal with the madness of all this. And be like, man, these people, look how stupid the oppressor is. You know what I mean? Like, yes. Oh, he's so fucking dumb. Jeff Bezos is so stupid. And what the producers of Hollywood did to the writers, they're so dumb. But they knew exactly what they were doing. That's why they did it. They're not, you know what I mean? Like, they know how to. And the only thing about it is, like, oftentimes they just get caught. That's the stupid thing.
I want to read this quote because it speaks to what you're saying, Elijah. It was from an article, but it's quoting a film professor from Vanderbilt University, Si-Young Kim. And she says, the narrative twist is that the middle-class salaryman, by acquiring violent masculinity, believes he is winning against an elite. But in the end, it is the upper class who was winning the entire time. Mm-hmm. The film's deep pessimism is found in the notion that agency, even violent agency, cannot change the class system.
Ooh.
Oof.
Yeah. And that's and what's fascinating about that is, like, we're shown so much horrific teeth being pulled out, live octopus, which we must return to, being eaten, all of the R wording, like all of the sexual violence. And what's the most fucking chilling was at the end, when, exactly like you're saying, you're like, and this was carefully calculated the whole time, and we're watching a movie, and what's, I think, brilliant about the script is you're like, oh, I thought we were ahead. I thought we were actually, like, smart here. And you're like, nope. And actually, I think there, if I was like, where could there maybe be like a way in for us, like anti-capitalists, like where could Odai-sun done something better? And I think the flaw is actually in this toxic masculinity. Why the fuck is he putting Mido in the jail? Like, that pissed me off. In the jail.
That was hella dumb.
I'm like, so, and like, that is actually, maybe there's something, maybe I'm extrapolating too much here, but like, maybe there's something there to say about like when people get off on their shit and they're like, no, I'm the one, I know how to do it. Like, you know, that was the only community he had, literally. I'm like, you could use someone. I get that you think you really know how to fight and like you're pretty good, but like you could have instead of thinking of this woman as a liability, maybe she could have been your comrade in this pursuit.
Right. And the violence in which you brought up this point, like the middle class person enacting violence. The violence he's always enacting is on people of a lower class or people of a subclass or an underclass. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he's only killing gangsters, or he's only like he's literally only really fighting other gangsters. So, you know, it's like, where do we direct our rage? You know what I mean? And and he can't even, it's not even until the end of the movie does he figure out that it's actually a person who is elite. The whole entire time he's running around trying to like torture these people who are essentially just doing a job. You know what I mean? Which sucks, like, because if you think about it, if you like showed up on a Thursday and you're like, oh yeah, I gotta go to work, and then all of a sudden this dude with a hammer comes out of an elevator and starts beating the shit out of your homies, that's a bad day.
I mean, I'm not gonna go to bat too hard for the guys who run the illegal private prison. They're kind of complicit.
They are, but I feel bad. Not for the guy. I'm talking about there's like one dude who's like kind of chubby, and he like swung at him and then got hit in the face with a hammer. I'm like, that dude just wanted to eat some McDonald's and go home. Like,
sure. No, that's
also, why didn't he free all the other prisoners? Like, maybe that there was some frustration.
Yes.
There was just so many moments, but you're right. He was blinded by this need, by this revenge, and by this like need to fulfill his own toxic masculine like revenge story, as opposed to like, which maybe is again like, liberate yourself from that so you can actually like get into some real solidarity. Because that's what I thought he was going to do. I'm like, oh, you're going to do like, where do they? I guess that's kind of a trope. I feel like it happens in a lot of, but like,
yeah. Because we're not supposed to sympathize with Odai-su. Like, Odai-su is an idiot. Odai-su is a drunk. Odai-su has a big mouth. Odai-su is a rapist. Like, we're not supposed to, like, he is cool in our eyes, and that's where I think a lot of people are just, like, a lot of people will say the ending is disturbing. And if you're following the plot, it's like, it's like a good Shakespeare. Like, if you follow Shakespeare, you realize like all of the things that are like the breadcrumbs for the tragedy have been set up from Act 1, Scene 1. You know what I mean? Like, this character is going to do these things because of the inherent flaw within the character. You know? So yeah, Odai-su's not even thinking about those other inmates. All Odai-su is thinking about is himself. Yeah, he doesn't even think about his dead wife. His wife is dead.
Yeah,
Yep.
Doesn't even think about, not once. Not even, he thinks about her in terms of himself. He's like, my wife is dead. How dare they kill my wife? Not, oh, I'm so sad that my wife is dead. He freaks out about having sex with his daughter because his daughter's gonna find out about what he did, not about his daughter.
Right.
It's fucked.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm cussing a lot.
No, that's right.
I mean, deserves it.
And his revenge obsession it's purely individual based. He's only thinking about who is this person that did this to me, not, and it goes back to what you just said, Rivka, about not freeing the inmates. Not once for a second thinking, oh, is this maybe part of a larger system? Are there similar things happening to these other inmates? Could I maybe learn things from these other inmates? Maybe we're in here for similar reasons. Maybe there's a larger, systemic conspiracy that is putting us all into this place. They even do it in Face
Off. They free the inmates.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
That's because that's Nick Cage. Nick Cage, a hero for the people.
I did really like, though, how other than just seeking revenge, the other big question that is consuming him is the why of it. The why was I put in this place? Who put me in, and why? And how the why seemed to be the thing that was driving him crazy for the most part. And I read that, and this was maybe, putting a little too much anti-capitalist sauce on this, but I read that as how people in our economic system, especially working class, poor folks, working poor, who don't have any sort of foundation in class analysis and any sort of theory or whatever, how there is so much anger and frustration and just a not knowing why everything sucks all the time. And like, I know that why are all these terrible things happening? Why is life so hard? Why am I in this position to begin with? And then how that can get misdirected, most commonly into conspiracy theories. It's a lot, it's the same kind of I know that there's a problem, and I'm just going to end up finding the wrong analysis as to why. But I think that really stuck out to me, because I think that's that not knowing why you have been so oppressed by this system it's a big theme of this movie, and something that I think is a very regular feature of our economic system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think you said this, but it ends up, it haunts us, and it ends up really kind of driving all of our actions and everything that we do. It becomes our obsession with our art. It becomes our obsession with our, with our therapy. It becomes our obsession, and oftentimes I think that's what kind of keeps us kind of running this hamster wheel. You know what I mean? Because if you can dangle the carrot in front of the person, and you can give them the kind of the hint of the why, all right, the why is this thing maybe. So then they'll kind of keep chasing that little thing maybe to get them out of the why. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, just maybe, I can start an Amazon. Maybe, just maybe.
Yeah.
The why isn't systematic. The why is I'm not working hard enough. Or maybe the why is systematic. So that just means we just get a couple more brown faces in places of power, that'll change it. Or a couple more women in places of power, that'll change it. Or maybe the why is the incarceration system. Well, you know what? Well, here's what we'll do. Well, maybe we'll arrest just a few less people instead of actually changing the incarceration system. That'll do the thing. And we keep pushing the wheel forward, and actually we're just kind of running in place.
Yeah, that's what this movie definitely felt like, running on a hamster wheel. But then also not knowing. I mean, it pays off because we do find out the why in not in 15 years. And I have to say, that was really fun, because I didn't know where the fuck it was going. And I think that's so rare.
You thought that was really fun?
I did think it was fun. I said at the top, I was like, I like dark shit. He started eating, let's get to this now. He started eating that live octopus, and I knew this was a film for me.
And he did that 4 times.
4 different octopus. And I believe
Damn.
spiritually he's Buddhist, and I think I heard that he had to
pray. He prayed and cried.
Yeah. That's dedication to your craft.
Yeah.
Oh
Not after my octopus teacher. Absolutely not.
Well, what that man did to that octopus was far worse. That was emotional fuckboy abuse. And
Sure.
I literally don't know how many more places I can talk about that movie. I was just on a podcast, and I usurped. I was like, actually, we're going to talk about My Octopus Teacher.
Have y'all done My Octopus Teacher yet? Have y'all done it yet?
We haven't. I'll be too enraged. Long story short, in case anyone hasn't heard this rant, or you can hear me say it 5 times, that man has no problem putting his hands all over that octopus, cuddling her. Oh. But then suddenly it's a boundary. It's an ethical boundary when the shark attacks and eats her. He can't do anything about it.
That's fucked.
It is fucked.
That's far worse.
Yeah, no.
There were no prayers involved or tears.
That's true. There was no intimate relationship created first before he engulfed that octopus.
But what an unbelievable... I mean, I know there's a lot of ethical issues, probably, and I'm sure people have gone off about it, and I'm not saying I condone that, but what a shot. What a shot.
I think it's an insane shot. And I heard somewhere that eating live octopus is a test of masculinity. I don't know which nation does this.
Interesting.
God, men are so stupid. We do the dumbest fucking things.
Well, it is interesting though, to your point of toxic masculinity, because if an octopus is the most, I think one of the most sentient, one of the most smart, but the nervous system of an octopus, it's feeling beyond belief.
Mm-hmm.
So
Jesus.
Yeah, like I think the amount of nerves and like brain chemistry and it's a living alien. Like we don't even know. We can't they can change total color and total shape, and like to want to like harm that and hurt that. So it is kind of like, well, if he can do that to this octopus, it's interesting if that's a ritual for becoming a man. It's like a ritual of disassociation, of alienation, and like pushing away your own humanity.
Right. And he says it like he starts to eat the octopus right after he says, "I need to eat something alive," which is like, it's just it's very chilling. I mean, that's like this might be telling on myself, but like that scene is the hardest thing for me to watch.
Mm-hmm.
He can cut his tongue off. He can rip dudes.
I was like, hands over eyes.
Yeah, because that's a real ass octopus. I was watching this with my partner, and she said, "Is that real?" I was like, "You could see that fucking tentacle wriggling out of his mouth. That is not CG. Like that is a real
he's acting.
octopus."
Where did he study?
That he is
To shame with the rest of us.
Troy Mean Seek. I was watching that I was getting prepped for this. I was watching that last scene where he's like screaming and like crying and like kissing the dude's shoe.
Oh my
God. I'm like, boy, you are eating this scene, bro.
Eating.
Yeah.
And again, talk about mirrors. That scene, that end scene mirrors the top scene when he's drunk in a prison station.
Yeah.
Like this whole film, I have to go through it, but
wow,
the whole film, I'm pretty sure, is like an onion, or like there's a better word for that. But like everything mirrors as you go out. So like the top has a mirrored scene.
Palindrome.
Yes. The top has a mirrored scene at the end. And like as you do that, each moment, which makes sense because the whole theme is mirror. And I do think there's something, I mean, obviously like the hardcore Freudian, that where it ends, where he has the dark monster self that keeps the memory, and then the other self that doesn't, and that there's this part of ourself that like keeps us from, I guess that's Freud's point of view, from keeps us from those. There's a reason we feel repulsed at the idea of having sex with our siblings or parents. And if that is removed, then God help you. Whatever happened, like removed by some form of trauma, that kind of idea. But I think in terms of capitalism, there is maybe, I don't know how you would interpret it, but there was something there about like what it does where we suppress so much of our natural instincts in order to survive inside of capital. Like I do think there is a division of self that people have. I even had that today. Maybe it was because I was watching this movie where I was just like, wait a minute, is this okay, review like talk about there, and I was like, the thought was, wait a minute, is this life? No, I love my life, y'all. That's not what I'm saying, but it was just more of a like, I was thinking about like, fuck, where's my next paycheck coming from? What's the plan for work? Doing the future chipping of like 20 years from now. And the only fucking reason I have to do that shit is because of capitalism. And it was just, the thought was like, wait a minute, what the fuck? I'm gonna die. I don't want to be planning my next, like having to figure out like survival. And that just felt like I related to that moment. I'm like, there's a part of me that had to separate, because if I was really connected in some ways and not suppressed, we would really revolt. Maybe there's some kind of revolutionary spirit there too.
Yeah. So are you saying, Rivka, that you're on a epic revenge fantasy through the streets of New York?
I mean, I could see how people would like if we really like. I feel like even in the reading, even with the work I do, I'm barely touching the surface of like what this really means. Like we're all still inside the Matrix. I have not, you know what I mean? Like we haven't gotten to like seeing the machine quite yet, because I think it takes a level of breaking your brain apart and there's like an insanity that will come.
Right.
And it's why we all need to do it together for like safety and mental health. But like, oof, it's scary. I think that's why I had that moment. I'm like, oh.
Right.
Because I can't do anything about it alone. I do have to think about it.
Yeah, and especially as Marxists, as materialists, we are fully engaging with the world around us as much as we are able to, and as much as like we have the scope in order to. I think about people all the time who say, I'm not political, I just don't really think about that stuff. And I'm like, what is your world like? Like, how do you go through the world and compartmentalize and divide yourself to the point where you see some of the most horrific shit we've ever seen on either TV, on TikTok, social media, whatever, whether it be what's happening in Gaza, whether it's just like our own American political system, whether it's the fucking carceral system in this country, whatever, you can't go through life and just like not see any of that stuff. So when you do, what do you think? How do you process that? That level of dissociation has to be harmful in some ways. It has to manifest in other ways, because I don't think that a person can I don't think a person can really just be not political and engage with so much of our world and not have like some sort of visceral emotional reaction. That's gonna like, if you're not processing it initially, it's gonna fuck you up on the back end somehow.
Well, that's also why I think we're seeing, I'm very critical of our current media state, but like, I think that's also why we're seeing such a backlash against media currently from those who are higher up, because even if you're trying to disassociate, the sheer amount of like images. I mean, there was a point in time on Instagram in which you couldn't get on Instagram without seeing images from Gaza, And like, I think even if you wanted to, you would have to like literally have to delete the app off your phone. And even then you'll probably see it if you go into the news.
And people did.
And people did.
And that was not good for business.
No, and that's exactly why I think people are why the higher ups are starting to shift it, because like what's happening is like that trauma that you're saying, like trying to repress it, or that anger that is mounting, they no longer have any control over it. And so like there is a need to like enact some sort of control and some sort of power to get you back on like the hamster wheel, to get you back to seeing the ads so you can go on Amazon, so you can buy your PlayStation 5. Not speaking from experience. So like
yeah, we have nothing bad to say about the Sony Corporation. Okay.
No,
they've given us a lot of joy. All right.
Yeah. No, there's nothing bad from Sony. But like, yeah, I mean, like, it's happening. It's currently happening. I think that's where we are right now. I think that's why, we're having conversations about anti-capitalism. I think that's why That's why you're seeing, the Democrats like freaking out because of all the shit that's happening with the protests, for Palestine. Like it's happening. There is a movement that is happening amongst the people who are looking around and being like, this shit ain't working. There needs to be a change. We just don't know where to direct that energy because we've been blinded for so long, But we are free, so to speak, like Odesu, and they're trying to build the larger prison. Y'all like that?
Yep.
How I'll turn it back around?
Very much.
Like a palindrome.
Like a palindrome.
Were there any other points that either of you wanted to hit before we went to award?
I'm just gonna say, look, I know we mentioned the hallway scene. Look, y'all, when I saw the hallway scene for the first time, I was in my dorm room at Yale School of Drama, and I was sitting. I remember exactly where I was. I was sitting on my bed, and I watched it, and by myself, and I was broing out by myself. I was like, bro, and there was no bros next to me. So that shit was amazing. When I watched it again this time, it was amazing. I almost didn't get through the whole movie because I watched it like 5 or 6 times. I love that scene. That scene is fire.
It's amazing.
It warrants that.
Even I broke out. I was like, it's still going.
It's still going.
Wait, did you know it hasn't stopped? It's all one shot. And I think it took like a few days. I think they did like 76 takes or something wild.
Oh, I'm sure.
Wild. But it's like, you see fight scenes. Like I know that this is more like we're talking about philosophy and politics and shit. But like, look, you see fight scenes and you see fights and you're like, I've never seen a fight that looked that real. Like it was sloppy and gritty, and they look like they hurt each other. And when he had the knife stuck in his back, I was like, how did they do that?
Well, I think that knife was like, I think the knife is CGI.
Oh, wow.
Okay. That makes sense.
That makes sense, yeah.
Sorry, I feel like I just told you Santa Claus was not real.
A little bit.
Because they had a real squid, so I'm like, maybe dude got stabbed for real. Would not be surprised.
Honestly, what was more impressive to me on this watch was how in the blocking of the fight scene, so many of the punches and the naps where his fist connects with someone's face, the person's face was turned towards camera, which is not what usually happens in a fight scene. Usually the person who's getting punched, their face is turned away from camera That way you don't actually see the fist not connecting with their face. But there were so many punches right to camera that these, like, the choreography, like, and I can't imagine, that's such precision you need to get in order for him to get close enough to punching a guy's face that it looks like he's connecting. And then the timing of the guy shaking his head, I was like, this is fucking unbelievable. I'm sure some guys actually got punched while filming.
Live fucking squid. Somebody got punched in the face.
Yeah.
Like dumbass.
And if they complained about it, they're like, that squid felt every bite in every single part of its body.
Jesus Christ. Oh my God. Ugh.
Okay, so this is the point where we will hand out awards for this movie. And our first award is Best Politics. This will go to the character with the best politics in the movie.
God damn.
I can't think of a single person off the top of my head.
I mean,
the octopus, if we can't come up with anyone else, the octopus is the floor.
well, the daughter didn't have bad politics. She didn't really have any.
She doesn't have,
we just never got a chance to really know her beyond being his sort of sexual obsession a little.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say she did take him in, but that was because of the hypnosis. So not even a real conscious choice.
Maybe the elevator lady, because she had such cool shades. She looked like she got good politics.
She could have good politics. Yeah. I'm trying to, wow.
Yeah, that's really hard. But that's the thing I think about this movie is that none of these people are good people.
Yeah.
That's what's cool about it. Yeah, not a single one.
Not a single person is a good
Wow,
person.
this might be a first.
Yeah.
I mean, we've given it to dogs before, so it's only fair to give it to the octopus.
Yeah, I think it has to be the octopus.
That fat guy who was just doing his job and got punched in the face.
Yeah, you can we'll have another nominee.
Again, I'm not gonna give best politics to one of the guys who works at the illegal private prison. Not gonna do it. I will not allow it. All right, our next award is worst politics. Goes to the character with the worst politics. Well, this will be a strong debate.
I mean, the easy one is Lee Woo-jin, who uses his money to torture and make a man have incestual relations with his own daughter. That's some pretty bad politics.
Because he had
he
sexual
impregnated his own sister.
Let's not forget the backstory.
Yes.
Not great either.
Yeah, so that's pretty bad.
There was something about Lee Woo-jin that made me think about how bosses, how large corporations will spend so much time and money just to make sure that their workers are fucking miserable. You know, like union busting, lobbying the government, whatever they need to do to keep their profit margins high that they know are just immiserating their workers. I felt like there was a parallel between Lee Woo-jin's obsession with destroying this guy's life for no material benefit. I guess that would be the difference, is that like he's not actually gaining anything from this.
Yeah, even he knows that once his vengeance has occurred, he has a line way in the beginning. He's like, what happens if I when this is all over? And then at the end, he ends up killing himself when it's all said and done. It's like he knows like what he's doing is also gonna give him no real satisfaction, and yet he himself is on a cycle of vengeance, just like Odesu is on a cycle of vengeance that both of them can't get off. So he's destroying himself even as he's destroying this other person. You know?
Totally.
Yeah.
While we're on him, I forgot to mention, I loved the use of the button that he's like, well, I could kill myself before you find out. And we find out at the end there was no, like he says he installed this like crazy heart thing.
Yeah.
It was kind of a crazy story, the pacemaker, but it did make sense. But it was like this metaphorical nuclear button that he was, well, I guess not metaphor, like nuclear button on his own body. And then we find out at the end it was never really there. That to me was a nice emblem of what it feels like right now when we're told, if you don't vote one way,
right,
you're gonna get Trump, you know, and like it just feels like.
Or if we enact the only right us as laborers have, which is to strike. Oftentimes they'll say, if you do that, you're gonna destroy all of us. And
yeah.
You know, and they'll blame us for striking, you know, which is currently what's happening, you know.
Let's give it to the bad guy.
I was going to say there's one other contender, and that is the warden of the private prison. This illegal private prison.
The gold teeth dude.
The gold tooth dude, just because he is like so like this is his business. His business is to illegally imprison these people, and like baby business is a boomin', and he seems to have no moral qualms about any of this. Even after he gets his teeth ripped out, he's
then he chooses to give up his hand to the master, which I think is great. That's like a very capitalist moment, right? He's like, okay, I will give you my hand in exchange for this building.
Yeah, a larger building.
A larger building so I can continue making profit and continue this business. Oof.
Yeah.
Like he's exacted more harm on more people over the course of his life.
Yeah.
Yes.
He even takes out his own satisfaction in money. So like he's
exactly
like, I'm gonna have revenge. I'm gonna beat this guy. I'm gonna rip his teeth out, and then money comes along. He goes, I guess I won't because I got paid. You know.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
purely
he does
transactional.
more of the dirty work, but I'm assuming this elite cat assuming this isn't the first private prison that he's funding. I'm assuming there's like this money, this wealth is coming from somewhere for our elite capitalists, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if we know who's harmed more people, just and I love that too. Like he made the first time you see everyone is so bloody and dirty, and the first time you see this like elite, the person running the whole thing get blood on his faces at the very end, and it's like very you know, he's like clean white business suit, the most good looking, and then he just gets like a little bit of blood, but I have a feeling he probably has a higher body count.
That's fair.
Yeah.
It's just like illusory.
Yeah, I think like by proxy. Like I don't like because he has such a visceral reaction to the getting of blood on himself that I think like
but the proxy is the capitalism, right?
Right.
Like that.
Yeah.
So
You're right. It's Lee Woo-jin. He didn't make it. He didn't make his money in an honest way. He's not like he didn't get like really into photography and is just like is just like a field photographer. It's not how he amassed his fortune.
God.
Yeah, his photography Instagram is not doing well. It's got 1,000 followers.
It's just all pictures of his sister.
I know.
Like dog, find a new subject. What is this?
Bruh.
Oh, God. All right. This should be a little more fun. This is Best Supporting Character. This goes to the supporting character that this movie should actually be about, or who we would like to see a movie about.
Oh, that's a good question.
This is your chance to nominate the dude at the front desk. I'd watch that movie.
Yeah.
I will watch that movie. I also want Mr. Han, the platinum blonde manservant.
He was very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Like how did he learn just the flip dudes that much that well? I'll also like to see Me Do's film. You know.
Yeah. Like what was Miju's being watched presumably her whole life by this evil dude. Yeah, I'm sure that was like a wild life missing dad. Like what's going on?
Yeah.
And then again, Palindrome, she ends up, I loved her moment where she had the angel wings on. And I thought the actress's choice of physicality was so fascinating in that moment. She was like sitting, trying to fly. It was such so good. The actors in this film are great.
Yeah, she's awesome. Like she's really good.
Yeah, I think I would also watch the workers of this private prison movie because, so often people who fall into a life of crime are people that come from like very poor material circumstances in the first place. So I think I understand why you love that chubby guy in the in the prison so much, Elijah, and sympathize with him because he's probably someone who didn't have a lot of opportunities or other outlets, and someone was like, "Yo, we got this job for you. It's kind of weird. You're not gonna be able to talk about it. You gotta be kind of like ethically unscrupulous, but it's like pretty good money." So yeah, I would watch more about that.
And then of course the Octopus Revenge film.
Yes. Yeah, like basically Cthulhu just attacks Soul.
Great.
That's Oldboy 2.
Great.
Rise of Cthulhu.
I would love that.
Elijah, this is really fun. I thought this is much a lighter conversation than I thought we would have about Oldboy. But before we let you go, the last thing we like to do is ask our guests how we as anti-capitalists strive to practice our values in our day-to-day lives. So is there one thing that you do, whether it's an organization you work with or a practice you engage in where you get the chance to practice your anti-capitalist values?
Yeah, I'll give a big. I'm gonna give a big shout out to the Encompass Collective. It's an organization that I had helped co-found with 3 other people from Yale. It's now being run by Janelle Chu and Shalia Latour, who are 2 actors in the city. They focus on providing affordable arts education to BIPOC students, particularly BIPOC students who are on the cusp of going to grad school or haven't got into grad school and need some secondary education. Check them out at Encompass Collective NYC is their Instagram page. They do amazing work. I've fundraised for them a couple years in a row, and I love to try to shout them out as much as I can. And then other than that, I'd be walking around. I'd be like, "Damn you, Jeff Bezos." Raise my fist in the air.
Yeah.
When I can.
Honestly, I think it's helpful, and we'll be sure to link to Encompass Collective in the show notes in the podcast player, so you can check that out. But I think there's just a lot of value in just talking about this stuff, and just bothering people with it. Not bothering, but just bringing it up and making it a part of our regular conversation.
Yeah, of course.
I know someone recently was like, "Man, why is everyone just talking about capitalism so much these days?" It's well, because the Red Scare really kind of scared people into not talking about it, and we're just so far removed from that now, and our material circumstances are getting worse and worse. So now everyone's like, "Oh, maybe it is time to talk about that thing that everyone told us we shouldn't be talking about for decades." So,
absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. This was such a great episode. We hope you come back.
Yeah.
Chat up another movie.
Yeah, and I got to get you, and I'm going to do this now since we're on the pod. I got to get you 2 on my podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Anytime.
I would love to.
That'd be dope. That'd be dope. Because we can also, we can make it an analyzing TV
I would love that.
through anti-capitalism.
Oh, yeah.
Let's do it.
Awesome. Elijah, it was so great meeting you, dude.
Yeah, great to meet you.
Thank you all so much for listening. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. And if you want to support this show and get access to our Patreon episodes, the link is in the episode description in your podcast player or at mvcpod.com. For next week, we'll be watching the Wall Street thriller Margin Call with our guest David Bruin.